Chapter 200. How could this be? Who would have thought that Fu Jiu's tutor was young Master Qin? Regret was not enough to express how the teachers were feeling right now. Their faces were all red, and they wanted to find a hole to hide in. This slap in the face was really embarrassing. Because everyone knew how good Qin Mo was, not because of his family background, but because of his inhuman grades and IQ. Looking at those physics questions that had been suppressed, the grade director suddenly remembered that young Master Qin did ask him about the physics course not long ago, and he also mentioned the problem of male and female desk mates. At that time, he always thought that young Master Qin did it for his girlfriend. Now it seemed. Could it be for Fu Jiu? Thinking of this, the grade director's eyes shook violently. They really screwed up today, and it was very likely that they had wrongly accused someone. The physics teacher in Fu Jiu's class wanted to explain for the other teachers. Unfortunately, Almighty Qin was never a person who would give others a chance in this aspect. He took off the black glove on his left hand, lifted his eyelids, and said indifferently, "I heard that the teachers wouldn't let it go until he called his parents over. Since we're done with the tutoring, let's talk about you guys slandering my little brother for cheating." Little brother? Everyone present was shocked again. When did this upstart Fu Jiu become young Master Qin's little brother? Every teacher was speechless at that moment, and their throats felt like they were choked by something. Qin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. What? You don't want to talk about it? At this point, Qin Mo tilted his head and laughed. His voice was still graceful, but it was bone-chilling. That's not up to you. My little brother is in the rebellious phase of adolescence. Psychologically speaking, this is the time when his mental endurance is at its weakest. As a teacher, if a student gets full marks, you don't praise him, but slander him indiscriminately. This will easily cast a shadow on him. Fu Jiu, although she really shouldn't have interrupted at this time. But how did the Almighty know that she was in the rebellious phase of adolescence? Qin Mo didn't look at the young man's eye contact. Even if he did, he would think that the young man was being bullied. This was the first time he came to school as a parent, so of course he couldn't let things develop like this. He continued to say indifferently, directorly, "When did the teaching quality of No. 1 middle school fall to this level? As a shareholder, how could I not know?" As soon as the year head heard the man call him out, he broke out in a cold sweat. Young Master Qin, this matter, do you want to settle this privately or publicly?" Qin Mo didn't wait for him to finish. He glanced at the few teachers standing at the side. They seemed to be well-mannered. However, every teacher knew in their hearts that regardless of whether this matter was settled privately or publicly, they would no longer be able to work in No. 1 middle school. Especially teacher Zhang, who taught Fu Jiu physics. The blood drained from her face rapidly, and her skin was as pale as a thin piece of paper. "Young Master Qin, we just thought that a poor student wouldn't be able to do so well, so we wanted student Fu Jiu to explain herself. We didn't mean to slander her." Chapter 201. Young Master Qin's question was like, "Do you want your left hand chopped off or your right hand chopped off?" No matter which hand he chopped off, it was the same as chopping off the hand. There was no difference. "Can't choose?" Qin Mo retracted his gaze and said faintly, "Then there's no need to choose. Teacher Li, remove these people's teacher identities and record them in the file." Was this public? The teachers were anxious. Once they were recorded in the file, not only would they not be able to teach at No. 1 middle school, they wouldn't even be able to be teachers in the future. "Young Master Qin, I choose private." Teacher Zhang's voice also changed. "You see, I can satisfy any condition Fu Jiu raises. The nature of this matter doesn't need to be recorded in the file. I misunderstood at the beginning." Teacher Zhang's words sounded like she was admitting her mistake, but in fact, she didn't mean to apologize at all. She just kept repeating that it was a misunderstanding. "Oh. You chose private?" Qin Mo raised his eyes and glanced in her direction. He raised his voice slightly and said carelessly, "Then, Teacher Zhang, please be prepared to go through the legal process." As Fujio's parent, I will sue you for slandering and ridiculing a student. Teacher Zhang was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that this was what young Master Qin meant by private. Her parents were both from the bureau. She didn't want to be recorded in the file because once she was recorded in the file, she couldn't be transferred to the administrative department as a teacher. But now, a teacher who had been sued by someone couldn't be a civil servant anymore. This time, Fujio really saw the Almighty's way of teaching people a lesson. It seemed that the Almighty was telling the truth when he said he would give in to her. It felt good to have a big brother to protect her. Thinking of this, Fujio raised her head and smiled at Qin Mo. Qin Mo didn't have time to deal with the youngster. The Almighty wouldn't stop until he finished dealing with him. Since he was the biggest shareholder, he had to have a proper meeting with this kind of problem. At the very least, he had to let some people know that his little brother wasn't someone anyone could bully. When the school leaders heard that young Master Qin was here, they all rushed into the small grade office. Fujio looked at the school leaders who were bald in front of their heads. She felt it was funny and couldn't help but curve her thin lips. Qin Mo took a moment to glance at the youngster. With a cold expression, he took a bag from the bodyguard and threw it to him. Fujio looked down and saw that it was dark chocolate imported from France. She ate it happily. She understood the look in the Almighty's eyes. He wanted her to wait here. Instead, Director Li, who had just been scolded, saw young Master Qin leading a few school leaders into the big office inside. She sneaked up to Fujio and said in a low voice, "Well, student Fujio, next week, the school will have a very small parent-teacher conference, and the parents of the top 10 students in the monthly test will be praised. Will young Master Qin attend as your parent?" Fujio held the chocolate in her mouth and said casually, "Probably not." Director Li muttered softly, "But young Master Qin seems to really like being a parent." Hearing that, Fujio stopped what she was doing and thought about it. They couldn't help but look at each other, and the scene of young Master Qin attending the parent-teacher conference appeared in their minds at the same time. In the end, Director Li decisively gave up. "I will immediately inform the grade to cancel this parent-teacher conference and change it to a letter format." Okay. Fujio also felt that as a school shareholder, the Almighty was indeed not suitable to attend the parent-teacher conference. Chapter 202. The school leaders were now experiencing what it meant to be a cold winter. Qin Mo sat on the leather chair with a calm expression on his face, but every word he said struck them straight in their hearts. The school leaders' hands were shaking when they left. From that day on, the school began to treat all students equally, regardless of whether they were good or bad. They would take care of those who needed to be disciplined, but they wouldn't discriminate against bad students. If any teacher still existed, they would be fired immediately. In the classroom, some students who didn't understand had already left. Only Shui Yaoyao was still waiting. After all, His Highness Zhou's bag was still there, so he would come back sooner or later. She was worried that the physics teacher called His Highness Zhou away. Could it be that there was something wrong with the monthly test? Everyone who participated in the esports competition knew that the results of this monthly test were very important to them. If something happened to His Highness Zhou, then their team, without His Highness Zhou, the He family army, would no longer have any meaning. Shui Yaoyao thought of this and stood up. She wanted to go to the office to have a look. As soon as the wooden door opened, she saw the clean and handsome face of the young man. Shui Yaoyao's eyes lit up. "His Highness Zhou, are you okay? The teacher called you." Before she could finish, she saw the man behind the young man and stopped abruptly. Almighty Qin? Why was he here? It wasn't hard to see the surprise on Shui Yaoyao's face. But Fujio just smiled lightly. "I'm fine. I came to get my bag." With that, Fujio walked over, casually pulled her left hand, and threw the bag over her shoulder. She still had one hand in her trouser pocket. That posture was always very cool. After all, Shui Yaoyao knew Fujio's gender. She felt a little guilty when she saw Almighty Qin, but after seeing the series of actions of His Highness Zhou, she felt that there was no need to feel guilty. His Highness Zhou's handsomeness was something that others couldn't learn. Almighty Qin probably wouldn't think that His Highness Zhou was a girl. Let's go together. Fu Jiu walked back and touched Shui Yaoyao's head. Brother Amo and I will send you back. She touched her head. Shui Yaoyao blushed. Even though she knew that His Highness Zhou was a girl, she couldn't help but be attracted by that tone. But as soon as she looked up, she saw Almighty Qin's cold and handsome face. His gaze swept over Highness Zhou's hand, and his thin lips seemed to be raised. But Shui Yaoyao felt the coldness in his smile, and her scalp went numb. She immediately said, Your Highness Zhou, you don't have to send me off. I also have an appointment with a classmate to eat ice, so I'll be leaving first. See you later. Almighty Qin's gaze was too terrifying. It was even more terrifying than before. Just because His Highness Zhou touched her head? Thinking of this, Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but look back. When she saw that godlike face, she immediately retracted her gaze. It was still too scary. Fu Jiu looked at Shui Yaoyao's back view in confusion, as if there was a devil chasing after her. She raised her pretty eyebrows in confusion. Qin Mo didn't make any unnecessary movements. He reached out and grabbed the back of the youngster's collar, calmly dragging the youngster into the car. Fortunately, it was late and there weren't many people in the school. Otherwise, the students would have seen the scene of the youngster being carried away like a sack by Qin Mo. It looked like a master disciplining a naughty kitten. Chapter 203. Only then did Fu Jiu realize that the Almighty had been drinking. Because the moment he got close to her, Qin Mo's breath brushed against her face, and the faint smell of red wine rushed over. Inexplicably, he said, No matter how good the phone is, it's just a decoration in your hands. Fu Jiu said, with a blank expression. Qin Mo originally planned to discipline the young man, but after seeing Fu Jiu's face, the idea faded a lot. He was an open-minded brother. The rebellious period of youth needed the most care. Obviously, today was not the day to criticize the young man. Thinking of this, Qin Mo withdrew his gaze and ordered the driver, Go to Milky Way Soho. Milky Way Soho? The mall? Why were they going there? Fu Jiu couldn't keep up with the man's thoughts. Was the Almighty going to take her shopping? Since when did the Almighty's hobby become shopping? Fu Jiu arrived at Milky Way Soho with a stomach full of questions. Two equally handsome people appearing in a mall together always attracted the attention of the people around them with an unexpected heat. Especially among those two, one of the young men liked to smile very much. When he saw the girls who turned around to take pictures of him, he would always look sideways and smile. So handsome. Not only that, but most importantly, in the eyes of the Fujoshis, the scene of the handsome man holding the young man's wrist and walking forward was enough for them to imagine countless scenes. Qin Mo had long been used to screaming, so he didn't think about what those Fujoshis were screaming about. Fu Jiu heard them. She pointed at herself, then at Qin Mo, and mouthed, Are we a good match? The girls were so excited that they were about to go crazy. Fu Jiu thought it was interesting. Looking at the man's black hair, she smiled. If the Almighty knew that others thought he was gay, his expression would definitely be very funny. Qin Mo stopped at a shop that specialized in buying candy. It was obviously inappropriate for him to appear here in a suit. The shop assistant who was greeting the customers was stunned for a moment, and then she laughed again. Sir, what would you like to order? Hearing the shop assistant's words, a few kids inside looked over at Almighty Qin and the others. Their round eyes were full of childishness, and their big eyes were full of childishness. Yes, sir. Sir, are you here to buy candy as well? Maybe he bought it for his baby. Yes. It had to be. Sigh, another little friend is going to fall into an adult's sugar-coated bullet. Just like me, if I'm not obedient now, my dad will tell my mom that I eat sweets. He was the one who bought the sweets for me and told me not to tell my mom, saying that these are the little secrets of a man. In the end, I've been tricked. Me too. Who do you think this big brother is trying to trick? Children's conversations were always very cute. Moreover, it was the first time they saw such a cold big brother buying candy. All of them couldn't help but look over curiously. Oh no. The little radishes shrunk their heads. The pretty brother he's holding in his hand heard us. Fujio. You guys are speaking so loudly, it's really hard not to be heard. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that he wanted to ask again, Sir. Chapter 204. Lollipops. The shop assistant smiled brightly. Are you buying them for your kid? Fujio knew that the Almighty was buying them for her the moment she heard the flavor, and she was about to deny it. But the Almighty's cool and magnetic voice came over again, and he said slowly and elegantly, Yeah, I'm buying them for my kid. The Almighty definitely did it on purpose, or he wouldn't have glanced at her when he said the word kid. The shop assistant had seen many adults buying candy for kids, but it was rare to see two as young as the two in front of her. She couldn't help but ask, Sir, how old is your kid? We have to choose candy according to his age, especially since you want a chocolate flavor. This kind of candy is not suitable for young kids. 17. After Chin Mo spat out his age. Not only the shop assistant, but also the kids in the shop were stunned. They asked with their eyes wide open, 17? How old is that? I'm 3 years old this year. 1 3-year-old is 3 years old. 2 3-year-olds are 6 years old. 3 3-year-olds are 9 years old. 4 3-year-olds. 4 3-year-olds. A little radish head was still counting with his fingers. In the end, he became anxious. He puffed up his cheeks and stomped his feet. What if 4 3-year-olds aren't enough? 4 3-year-olds indeed weren't enough. It was really hard for kids. The shop assistant cleared his throat with difficulty, as if he was making a final confirmation. Sir, did you say 17? Not 7? Yeah. After Chin Mo responded, he pushed the young man forward and curled his thin lips. Although his behavior of eating candy is childish like a 7-year-old, his face is indeed 17. Fujio. She was sure that the Almighty came to buy candy just to mock her more vividly. The shop assistant saw the man's movement and realized that the candy was for the young man. He paused and smiled apologetically. Please wait a moment, I'll go get the candy for you. Hearing that, the little boy lowered his head as if he was having an important meeting. He said in a deep voice, Did you see that? That big brother is buying candy for the pretty brother in his hand. I saw it. I think it's a trap. I think it's a trap. It's definitely a trap. Should we tell beautiful brother not to take it? I don't think it's a good idea. Beautiful brother looks like he wants to eat it. Sigh, I can understand him. When I don't have any candy to eat, I have the same expression. Fujio. What's wrong with her expression? Wasn't he still handsome? Also, kids over there, when you whisper to each other, can you lower your volume a little? However, having a big bag of lollipops to eat was indeed a very happy thing. Moreover, this brand of chocolate was very pure. When mixed with sweets, it would create a wonderful taste. After Chin Mo paid the bill, Fujio tore one out and put it in her mouth. With her beautiful silver hair and perfect nose, she looked much more obedient. Chin Mo held his wallet and glanced sideways at the youngster. He pressed his furry head in satisfaction, his expression still noble and cold. You did well this time, but if I see you touching someone's head again, not only will these lollipops be thrown into the dustbin, no one in the entire Jiang city will sell you even half a lollipop. Do you understand what I mean? Chapter 205. That's what I said. This big brother is even more ruthless than my dad. He won't let anyone sell candy to that pretty big brother. It's so scary. Pretty big brother is so pitiful to be his baby. Yeah, so pitiful. The little radishes nodded in unison. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that she was about to explode. Fujio took the candy, supported herself with one hand, and jumped in. Her movements were very handsome. She stood there with her long legs and winked at one of the little girls. She bent down and whispered, "Let me tell you a secret. That big brother was drunk. I did all this to make him happy. By the way, look at me, I'm so big. How do I look like his baby? Drunk?" The little radishes gathered together again and looked at Almighty Chin, who was standing outside the shop, as if they were looking at an inhuman being. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows. He didn't hear Fujio's words, but he knew it was the youngster's doing. He reached out his left hand and dragged the youngster back. That shop assistant watched with her mouth wide open. She was amazed by the silver-haired youngster's skills. So cool. Was he really not a criminal police officer? You don't even let kids off. Chin Mo's voice was very cold. What a flirtatious guy. Fujio agreed. Brother Mo, don't you think those little radishes are very cute? Chin Mo didn't say anything. He just turned his handsome face sideways and took the youngster to the third floor. Fujio thought at first that the Almighty finally took her to a more normal floor. The second floor was filled with children's clothing. The third floor was very modern, with all kinds of big brands. But why did the Almighty choose CK of all places? It was all underwear, and it hurt her eyes. Go pick two. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows at Fujio, looking very indifferent. Fujio. She was a girl, why would she buy men's underwear? I don't need this. Fujio raised the candy in her hand handsomely. I'm fine with these rewards. If Almighty Chin could accept rejection, he wouldn't be called Almighty Chin. Go pick. Don't always make yourself look soft and white. Fujio. Was the Almighty attacking her inner self instead of her grades? What's wrong with white? Fujio thought that this was a great color, and it should be loved by a germaphobe like the Almighty. Chin Mo glanced sideways, glancing at the youngster. From a psychological point of view, the one at the bottom would like to wear white. Fujio, in such a situation, the shop assistant was still hesitating whether or not to interrupt. Chin Mo had already raised his slender and fair fingers, pointing at a pair of pure black underwear hanging on the far right. That style, I want one. With that said, he turned sideways and glanced between Fujio's legs, curling his thin lips into a mocking smile. Give him the smallest size. Yes, sir. The shop assistant felt that the conversation was back to normal and quickly turned around to pack the packaging. Fujio felt that the way the Almighty looked at her was filled with humiliation towards humanity. I'm medium. The shop assistant paused and turned around, only to see the young man gently smiling at her. Sorry to trouble you, give me a medium size. This. The shop assistant didn't know who to listen to. Chin Mo's expression was indifferent. He didn't say much. Seeing this, the shop assistant naturally sided with the youngster. All right, please wait a moment. Chapter 206. Chin Mo stood there, tall and slender, letting the young man tease his ear. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, exuding an air of abstinence and indifference. Instead, it was the two girls standing outside who blushed. They really wanted to take pictures of these two handsome guys with their arms around each other's shoulders. Especially the scene of the young man standing on his tiptoes and curling his lips into a smile beside the man's ear. It was so pleasing to the eye that it made people's hearts beat faster. But just as they were about to raise their phones, the man suddenly made a move. He directly grabbed the young man's wrist and pressed him against the fitting room. His tall figure was pressed down, and his waist was elongated. His voice was cold and deep. You want to prove that you're not small? Go in and take off your pants. Big brother will measure it for you. She didn't even have one, so how could she measure it? Fujio suddenly felt that she was in a dangerous situation. How could she forget that Almighty Chin was drunk today, so she couldn't flirt with him casually? Brother Mo, I was wrong. At this moment, she had to retreat in order to advance. I shouldn't have blown air into your ear. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man's slightly depressed face. Finally, he let go of his hand and said coldly, "Good that you know." The shop assistant softly said, "Sir, the underwear has been wrapped for you. Is there anything else you two would like?" Same style, large size. When Chin Mo said this, he looked in Fu Jiu's direction again with faint mockery. It was as if he was saying, "Do you think you're not small when you're wearing a medium size?" Fu Jiu understood that expression. It was a little unnatural, which made her subconsciously want to look at a certain part of the Almighty's body. It was really a little embarrassing. Fu Jiu hid something in her heart, so when the Almighty asked her what else she wanted, she casually pointed at strangely shaped underwear. When did CK have something like this? And it had a pure black cat tail? Chin Mo also noticed the underwear the young man was pointing at. His eyes paused for a moment, and he said faintly, "I really didn't know that you liked this kind of stuff. But I can't buy it for you. You're still in puberty, and it's not good for your body to wear too tight, not to mention this kind." At this point, Chin Mo frowned as if he was thinking of an adjective. After thinking for a long time, he finally followed his heart. The shop assistant smiled and covered her mouth, as if she was trying to restrain her respect for the customer. This time, Fu Jiu was really depressed. Shopping with the Almighty had caused her reputation to go down the drain. She had just casually pointed at him. However, the shop assistant didn't seem to think so. When she handed him the shopping bag, she lowered her voice and said gently, "I understand, handsome. Next time, you can secretly buy it yourself. Since you're so handsome, I'll give you a 10% discount." Fu Jiu. She really didn't want such a discount. She originally thought that she would be depressed all the way with the Almighty, but unexpectedly, the Almighty suddenly changed his attitude. He pointed at a pure white sweater and asked Fu Jiu to try it on. Fu Jiu also thought that the sweater was pretty good. It was almost winter, and it was more important to wear warm clothes, so she didn't reject it. The fitting room was, of course, locked. With her previous experience, Fu Jiu was very insightful in this regard. Chapter 207. The workmanship and material of the sweater were very exquisite. Just by looking at it, it looked very soft. Not to mention the feeling of wearing it, it felt warm and comfortable. That pure snow-like color might be ruined if worn by someone else. But on Fu Jiu, it only made the young man's snow-white skin and dark eyes look good. In addition to that silver hair and the black ear stud on her porcelain white left ear, she looked up and smiled, and the female shop assistant was stunned. So handsome. As for how handsome she was and how much Fu Jiu suited the color white, people who hadn't seen it wouldn't know. It was as if she was born to be a clothes hanger. Even if it was a Korean version, it wouldn't drag on her. The sweater didn't have a collar, and it showed off her fair collarbones. But Fu Jiu had that devilish, bloodthirsty coolness about her, and it made people's hearts beat wildly when they saw it. Chin Mo, who was sitting on the sofa, heard the sound and looked over. When he saw the young man who was tidying his hair with his left hand, his deep eyes couldn't help but sink. Then, he stood up and walked over to Fu Jiu. His slender fingers moved, and he smoothed the young man's fluffy silver hair. Fu Jiu looked up, and their eyes met. She smiled at Chin Mo, and it was as bright as the first melting of winter snow. That kind of warmth could be felt even on her fingertips. Chin Mo curled up the corner of his lips, and the girls next to him held their faces one by one like they were infatuated. How can someone be so handsome? A handsome couple. Did you see that? When that handsome guy tidied up the silver-haired young man's hair, my heart almost melted. His smile was so gentle, completely different from before. Don't say any more, my health bar is almost empty. The female shop assistant had been in the shop for a long time, and she had good eyesight. Seeing the man like this, she immediately said, "Actually, we have a bigger size for this sweater. It's very suitable for two brothers to wear together." "Sir, would you like to buy one? Hearing that, Qin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. He remembered his conversation with Boss Lee before. The rebellious young man always liked to get more attention. Although he didn't consider wearing a brother outfit, it was still a good way to get closer to him. Okay. Hearing this word, Fu Jiu was somewhat surprised. After all, a person like the Almighty usually wore a suit or a uniform of dark colors. She didn't expect him to accept white. The sweater that Qin Mo wore was completely different from Fu Jiu's. Even though they both looked handsome, Almighty Qin made people feel cold and noble, and the unique design of the wide sleeves made him look like a vampire aristocrat. One slap on the face was enough to make women go crazy. But when the young man was standing beside him, the girls couldn't help but get rid of that thought. Because compared to snatching the man over, she always felt that the two of them looked more sweet. With two equally outstanding people wearing the same clothes, it didn't take long for them to cause a sensation among the girls. Fortunately, Almighty Qin's actions were quick and didn't give the media a chance to take a picture of him. However, Secretary Liang, who had received orders to wait in the car, was completely stunned when he saw the clothes of the two people. What did he see? Love, couple outfit. Chapter 208. Of course, Qin Mo also noticed Secretary Liang's gaze, so he glanced at him indifferently. That gaze was extremely cold. Secretary Liang shivered and swallowed the question in his mouth with difficulty. He looked at the shining white sweater in the rearview mirror. There would be an esports interview later. If CEO Qin appeared in front of everyone in this outfit, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. After all, CEO Qin had never dressed like this in front of others. After walking around for so long, Fu Jiu was already hungry. Qin Mo heard the young man's stomach rumble, so he asked someone to buy a bunch of food and threw them all into the young man's arms. Which one do you want to eat? Pick one. Fu Jiu was not a picky eater, and she loved meat the most. She took a bite of the chicken burger from Burger King. Burgers paired with Coke were the best. Fu Jiu's handsome face puffed up as she ate. Qin Mo frowned. Secretary Liang thought that CEO Qin would teach the young man not to eat in the car and to eat at home. After all, CEO Qin was a clean freak, and everyone in Jiang City knew about it. To his surprise, CEO Qin didn't say anything. Instead, he picked up a tissue and wiped the young man's mouth with disgust. Go to the Fu house first. Yes, young master. The driver heard Qin Mo's order and turned the car around. Fu Jiu lifted the corner of her eyes and glanced at the man who was still working on documents. She thought that the Almighty hadn't eaten since just now, so she took out a French fry and put it on his lips. Qin Mo didn't eat this kind of junk food, but the young man was in his rebellious phase, so it was best not to reject him. He opened his mouth and took a bite. It tasted good, so he let the young man do whatever he wanted. Secretary Liang felt like he had been hit the hardest the whole time, until he sent the young man home. His CEO was still warning in a low voice, with his deep and charming eyes. Stop flirting with people. Take a day off. The esports competition is the day after tomorrow. I'll be on the top floor of the Qin group. Get the uniform and wait for you. Yes. This was the first time Fu Jiu responded to Qin Mo. Not for anything else, but because she felt that it was a very exciting thing to be teammates with a god. Secretary Liang didn't understand. He couldn't help but look back, thinking, CEO, you don't look like you're teaching your brother. After the Hummer drove away, Fu Jiu walked towards the villa. He Honghua sat at home and didn't know about Fu Jiu's results. She glanced at the registration on the website again, but in her heart, she was thinking that if it really didn't work out, she would voluntarily withdraw from the competition. He Honghua was very clear about their grades. They could barely pass the rest of the exams, but they only scored a little more than 10 points in physics. She had never been to school and did not know what physics was. However, if this name list really appeared on the day of the esports competition and Jiu was unable to participate due to his results, then Jiao would be attacked even more. In the past, He Honghua had also thought about letting the child get better grades, but she firmly believed that there were only so many years in a person's life. Now that Jiao was so obedient, she would let the child do whatever he wanted. To her surprise, before He Honghua could make a decision, her home phone rang. It was a call from the school. "Hello, Ms. He? I am." Chapter 209. First in the whole grade? He Honghua's face was full of indescribable shock. At that moment, she even suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. The phone was still ringing. "Hello? Miss He? Are you still there? Miss He? He Honghua came back to her senses and asked hesitantly, "How many Fujios are there in number 1 middle school?" "Teacher, did you call the wrong number?" "How could that be?" The teacher chuckled. "There is only one Fujio in the whole school, and this is his home phone number." He Honghua couldn't hold back her excitement. You mean my Jiao really got first in the exam?" "Of course it's true. The results will be announced in the form of posters in the whole school tomorrow. The most important thing now is his application for the competition. This kind of extracurricular competition usually requires the consent of the parents. I called you this time mainly to talk to Ms. He about this." "I agree." He Honghua's face was red, and she was so happy that even her tone changed. "As long as the school doesn't have any problems, I will agree with whatever my Jiao does." The teacher knew that He Honghua spoiled her children, but she didn't know who spread this rumor to demonize Fu Jiao's mother. In their eyes, He Honghua became an unreasonable country girl. Not only was she uncultured, but she also thought that whatever their son did was right. This time, after a short phone call, the teacher realized that He Honghua wasn't what she thought she was. Although this middle-aged woman wasn't cultured, she wasn't arrogant. Instead, she was very polite. Even if she spoiled her children, it was only under the school's permission. And who wouldn't spoil a child like Fu Jiao? The teacher was also a mother. She was watching the previous interview when she called. Fu Jiao's short words made her realize that this young man deserved to be spoiled by anyone. Fu Jiao pushed the door open and saw He Honghua's happy face. It was said that women were no different from children when they got older. This was especially true after He Honghua got close to her Jiao. After seeing Fu Jiao, she circled around Fu Jiao like a little girl. "Jiao, I got a call from your school. The teacher praised you for a long time and said that I was good at teaching children. Dear Mrs. He, you've always been good at teaching children." Fu Jiao pulled He Honghua over and sat down with a smile. "Otherwise, how did I get such an excellent product?" He Honghua heard this and smiled even sweeter. "Yeah. That was the logic." Chen Xiaodong, who had just walked in, didn't know what was going on. He saw that his young master was coaxing his wife like a girlfriend. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Why did he always feel that after he woke up from the hospital, he became more and more like a monster? The exam papers had just been handed out today. Could it be that young master didn't do well on the exam, so he gave madam a warning in advance? Chen Xiaodong thought to himself, even if young master doesn't do well in the exam, it doesn't matter. If young master can be as sensible as he is now, I will follow young master for a lifetime. Chapter 210. Fu Jiao sat on the sofa, still wearing her school uniform. She casually put one hand on the back of the sofa, looking devilishly handsome from head to toe. "Who told you that I was worried about my mom knowing about my results?" Chen Xiaodong's eyes lit up when he heard that. "Did young master advance by 1 rank? That's great. What do you mean advance by 1 rank? He Honghua walked over with a round face. She couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. Our Jiao got first place in the whole grade. First, in the whole grade? Chen Xiaodong was petrified. The first place in the whole grade who got full marks in all 5 subjects was their young master? What on earth did young master eat to become so powerful all of a sudden? Could it be because of young Master Qin? It was said that the power of love was great. He didn't believe it before, but now that he saw his young master, he believed everything. That young master who didn't even know how to touch a computer now locked himself in his bedroom and played games all day. Not only that, but there were also physics exercises. When did young master study so obediently? All these changes were because of young Master Qin. For the sake of Madam's happiness, he would keep this secret to himself, but Honghua wasn't worried about this. Instead, she asked, "Joe, I saw the registration on the website system. Where did your team come from? Do they all know how to play games?" "Of course." Fu Jiu chuckled. "Mom, leave the competition to me. Just stay at home and rest." Honghua thought that her Jiu's definition of how to play games was different from hers. She was talking about a professional. Even if he wasn't a professional, he would at least be a god. But as long as Jiu was happy, she could do whatever she wanted. Honghua's biggest wish was to make her child happy, no matter what. At this moment, in a big hotel in the west of Jiang City, Fu Zhongyi specially held a small cocktail party to promote Fu Ximing. Other than the Fu family's business partners and school leaders, there were also Fu Ximing's friends from other teams. So naturally, the media would come after hearing the news. "Young Master Fu, I heard that you are very confident about this esports selection contest." When the reporter was interviewing, he had a smile on his face. It was obvious that he was here to support Fu Ximing. Fu Ximing was wearing a pure white suit. His small face had a unique arrogance. "Of course, I believe in my strength, and I believe in the strength of our team even more. The esports selection contest is just a beginner's competition. Of course, we will win. I believe that." The reporter said passionately, "This time, the Fu Corporation has recruited quite a number of almighties into the team. Even young Master Fu himself is a famous almighty in the game. As for who it is, I can't say yet. But overall, this is definitely an esports competition worth looking forward to." This was the industry. Apart from having some ability, one also needed to know how to package and create hype. Under his mother's influence, Fu Ximing had learned how to behave. Fu Zhongyi, on the other hand, looked at his proud youngest son and couldn't help but be delighted. When he received the guests, his face was full of smiles. The leaders of No. 1 middle school also walked over. Chapter 211. The school leader gave Fu Zhongyi enough face and said with a smile, "Boss Fu, you really know how to educate your child. The results this time are so good that it's shocking. The school wanted to hold a parent-teacher conference, but we cancelled it because we were afraid that it would affect the students' studies. But Boss Fu, sometimes you should really go to the school and tell them how you raised your child." Fu Zhongyi heard that and thought that the school leader was praising his youngest son. His face became even more proud, but he still said modestly, "You flatter me. Ximing has been sensible since he was young. Whether it's in games or studies, he has never let me down. This child is so capable that even I, as his father, have benefited from it." Who knew that when the school leader heard this, he froze in an instant. He cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "Well, Boss Fu, I was talking about your eldest son, Fu Jiu." "Him?" Fu Zhongyi's expression was blank for a moment. After all, he never expected that the other party would bring up that useless loser. When Fu Ximing heard the name Fu Jiu, he wanted to skin the other party's bones. He stood there and laughed arrogantly. "So the director is talking about my big brother? Looks like my big brother is finally a little more sensible this time. He knows how to study. If the director is praising him like this, his results must be pretty good. He is in the bottom 20. The results will be announced tomorrow. But your big brother is much better than you think." The director's expression changed when he talked about Fu Jiu. "I've never seen such a smart student. He got full marks in all 5 subjects. I was the supervisor when he took the English exam, and he handed it in less than an hour. That English essay was so beautiful. As the top student in the whole grade, except for young Master Qin, he didn't surpass anyone else. Boss Fu, your eldest son is too low-key. Otherwise, he would have definitely become a popular figure in school. Even my daughter, who is in junior high, is crazy about him. She asks me to take her to see the latest school hunk every day. I don't know where these kids found this picture, but they said that they should look up to His Highness Joe in the future. Not only must they be handsome, but they must also have a good character. Speaking of which, my daughter really became a lot more sensible after that. Is this the legendary power of idols? Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. The director was a straightforward person. He laughed out loud at the end, and he didn't notice that Fu Zhongyi and Fu Ximing's faces turned green after hearing his words. Especially Fu Ximing. He clenched his fists, and his fingertips dug into his palms. He was clenching his fists tightly. The director's words really made him feel like someone had slapped him in the face. It was burning and embarrassing. Top student in the grade? That trash? How could it be? What power of idols? He knew better than anyone else what kind of a freak that was. He was a man himself, but when he saw someone taller and stronger than him, he couldn't move his eyes away. He would throw money around and show off his wealth. What right did such a good-for-nothing have to be a popular figure in the school? Fu Ximing narrowed his eyes. After the esports competition was over and King destroyed He Honghua's stupid company, he would come back and teach that blind piece of trash a lesson. The next day, as soon as the poster was announced, all the students in number 1 middle school gathered around. Chapter 212. These people were a little pretentious. He always felt that if he excelled in his studies, he would look down on this and that. He even felt that he was very righteous. No matter how good Fu Jiu was or how handsome she was, if she didn't have good grades, they would still be against her. His expression was one of, "I just don't like you." Nobody actually cared whether they liked it or not. Everything was because they thought they were very important, so even when looking at the results, they would put on an arrogant face. After they saw their own results, they looked at the last place, so that they could find another chance to mock those who liked Fujiu. But he couldn't find it. They counted from the back to the front, but they couldn't find the name that they thought would appear. Instead, when he raised his head, the most eye-catching thing was the youth's photo. That group of people's expressions changed. This year, the first place in the whole grade had an unbelievable result, and they had all heard about it from their teachers. But they didn't expect that the unbelievable person was actually Fu Jiu. The Fu Jiu that they thought was trash. In an instant, this news blew up in the school hunk selection thread. Who said that Our Highness Jiu only has looks? Look at this score. Holy sh*t, how did you get full marks in your English test? What an amazing score. Number 1 middle school is really amazing. On the campus forum, there were not only students from the same school, but also students from other schools. Those who liked Fu Jiu were proud that His Highness Jiu had received more praises. However, there were still people who sneered. This kind of results might have been copied. What's there to be proud of? He still doesn't know anything. If I were to say that the school hunk should be Almighty Qin. Have you all forgotten about Almighty Qin? Almighty Qin is no longer on campus. At least find someone like Almighty Qin. What's so special about this Fu Jiu? Compared to Almighty Qin, it was like heaven and earth. To the one above, please don't compare the two. I like Almighty Qin too. I believe that with Almighty Qin's character, he wouldn't want to see anyone step on another person when they like him. Hee, step on? Is Fu Jiu worth stepping on? You even deleted my comment? It's useless even if I delete it. What I said is the truth. A gay wants to be the school hunk? Those who like Fu Jiu are all crazy. If you ask me, only Fu Ximing from our class deserves the title of the new school hunk. Do you know how awesome he is? Not to mention his exam results, he was a god-level character and hero. Like Almighty Qin, he was a professional player. On the list of the esports selection contest this time, he was the captain of the team. Just the number of god-level players under him was uncountable. Only this kind of person is worthy of being the school hunk, okay? It's just that he's more low-key, unlike your Highness Joe, who just got a little better in the exam and still has to make it known everywhere. I just chuckle. Shui Yaoyao came to find Fu Jiu today because she wanted His Highness Jiu to take a look at the posts about her on the forum. It was supposed to be a happy thing, but she didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Even if the other party wanted to flatter Fu Shiming, there was no need to say such things about His Highness Jiu, right? Her fingers moved angrily, and she was about to type a reply. Chapter 213. Shui Yaoyao looked up and stared blankly at the excessively handsome young man in front of her. Fu Jiu chuckled and continued, "Don't forget, our goal is to dominate the entire selection contest." It was because of the young man's devilishly handsome attitude that made people's blood boil with excitement. In the beginning, she played hero because she wanted to find some friendliness and comfort in the game world that she couldn't find in real life. But now, she not only found it, but also learned to fight and be strong. This was a battlefield. If His Highness Jiu was the king, then they were his loyal knights. Every one of us would tell ourselves that. If I were strong enough, I would face humiliation and ridicule, and I would say loudly, no. This competition was not just a simple game. They had to fight for their dignity. Would tomorrow, when people found out about His Highness Jiu and Spade Z's identity, they wouldn't look at her in such a strange way? The night before the competition, there were bound to be people who couldn't sleep well. Shui Yaoyao was the first. After she finished a math problem, she forced herself to go to bed early, but she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Finally, she sat up and started to study the technique Fu Jiu taught her. Feng Shang was also in the same state. He sat in front of the computer, but he didn't play any games. He just looked at the game character on the screen, and then he glanced sideways at the place on the calendar that was heavily circled with a red circle. Being a professional player. That was something he didn't even dare to dream of before. Feng Shang lowered his head and clenched the mouse in his hand. Without his glasses, he was really too handsome. People were still playing games in the internet cafe, and Hero's page was hanging high up on the screen. Someone knocked on the counter. "Boss?" "Hi, boss. What are you doing?" "Give me a Coke." Yin Weiyao didn't say anything. With a cigarette in his mouth, he handed over the Coke. That person touched his chin and asked, "What's wrong with the boss today?" "I don't know. He looks different from usual, and I heard that the internet cafe will be locked at 10:30 today." "Damn. So early?" "I was going to pull an all-nighter. I've never seen an internet cafe that doesn't open at night. Our boss is so capricious." Yin Weiyao flicked the cigarette butt. "What are you talking about?" "Brats, pack up and get ready to close." "Are you really going to close the door?" "No, boss, uncle." "Where are you planning to go?" "Aren't you going to open the internet cafe?" Yin Weiyao paused, taking his jacket and flinging it over his shoulder. "Uncle, I'm going back to my old profession, playing in the professional league." Yin Weiyao walked out of the internet cafe after saying that, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. "Did you hear that? The boss said he was going to play in the professional league?" Could the boss be joking? At his age, it's unlikely. It was too cold outside the internet cafe. Yin Weiyao started to regret running out on impulse. He wasn't young anymore. In the words of a child, his hand speed and eyesight had long since fallen behind in a professional team. Why was a 30-year-old uncle still jumping around? However, his body couldn't help but reignite that hot blood in his body. Chapter 214. This reminded Yin Weiyao of the earliest times when he played hero. At that time, many people who played games were not understood. It wasn't like now, where a great god would be sought after by everyone. In the past 6 years, in the eyes of most people, anyone who had anything to do with computers was a loafer. Esports would always be rejected in China. Therefore, whether it was his relatives or classmates, the first thing they saw when they mentioned that he worked in the game industry was subtle disdain. Playing games can also earn money? Spending money is more like it. Such a person is a glutton and lazy person. He won't have much success in the future. Yin Weiyao sat on the railing outside the internet cafe, cocking his head and lighting a cigarette. Even he himself did not understand why he would think of something so long ago today. How many people say, he is not practical? He gritted his teeth and persevered. He thought that one day, he would prove to everyone that what he was doing was called esports and not just a game. Finally, he entered a pro team. He thought that he could finally shine. However, in just half a year, in the short span of half a year, all of his passion for this industry had been obliterated. It turned out that you didn't have to play the game well to make a name for yourself. How to promote, whether or not your agent will support you, the competition between people in the same industry, and the betrayal of your closest comrades in order to steal fans. Yin Weiyao stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. Just as he was about to enter, his phone screen lit up. It was a message from their temporary team's WeChat group. 999 brand lollipop, can't you all sleep? Come out, I have gifts for you. What a child, a high school student. Yin Weiyao snorted, but his lips curled into a smile. With a cigarette in his mouth, he put on his hat and ran towards the address that the youth had sent to the group. There weren't many cars on the road at night. Especially in the north, like Rivertown, the colder it was, the fewer people there were. However, for some reason, his chest and palms were burning hot. Feng Shang put on his coat and left. Shui Yaoyao also left at the same time. It was as if no matter how dark or cold it was outside, at that moment, even their eyes were bright. And what attracted them was the young man standing in the empty square of Chang'an Street. That tall and slender, his back straight and straight, wearing a black leather jacket and short silver hair, he leaned against a pure black Land Rover. After 11:00 in the evening, there were not so many cars on Chang'an Street. Therefore, even the sound of breathing while running could be heard clearly. Shui Yaoyao took the last train while Feng Shang drove and Yin Weiyao took a taxi. The three of them came from the north, south and east respectively. He didn't know if it was because he was running too fast, or because of the figure that emitted light even under the night sky. His heart was beating so fast that it felt a little tight. That kind of feeling didn't only occur when one was in love or missing someone. And it was now that they saw their companions and smiled at each other. Fu Jiu smiled as well. She walked over from the other side and raised her hand. The trunk and car lights were turned on at the same time. Under the dazzling light, all the rose petals that were pressed against the back of the car gushed out, just like a scene from a comic. Both Shui Yaoyao and Feng Shang were stunned when they saw this. It seemed to be the most beautiful scene they had ever seen. Chapter 2:15. Team uniform. Shui Yaoyao never thought that His Highness Jiu would give them this as a gift. When she turned her head to look, even the handsome Uncle Yin Weyao's eyes changed when he saw the uniform in his hands. Needless to say, Feng Shang's fingers trembled when he touched the fabric in his hands. He had seen too many players trained by his brother. Every time he watched a professional league match, he would think that those people were so handsome when they sat in front of the computer in their uniforms, typing on the keyboard, and waving the mouse. If he didn't stutter, his life might not be like this. But it was inevitable that he felt inferior. In fact, before he met his idol, he was afraid to communicate with others. When Feng Shang thought of this, he raised his eyes and looked at the smiling young man with his hands in his trouser pockets. Fu Jiu looked back at him. She raised her hand and put on the uniform that belonged to her. The quality of the uniform was very good, and it was obviously custom-made. The smooth lines slid down the shoulders, and with that handsome and fair face, she looked cool and noble. Shui Yao Yao and Yin Wuyao looked at each other and pulled up the zipper. 4 people of different heights, all wearing the same uniform, stood in the middle of the square. Their feet stepped on the car lights, and the rose petals didn't fall for a long time. The next day, all kinds of news about the selection contest swept across the internet. Even if there was no news, there was still some news. After all, this was the most anticipated competition for everyone who played Hero. People who didn't play games wouldn't understand what it meant to change from a non-professional player to a professional player. What's more, the person standing on the top floor waiting for the new contestants was none other than the most valuable professional player in the esports world, Qin Mo. Just hearing his name could make people's blood boil. Not to mention that almighty Qin would be on camera the whole time. In the words of the media, this was the era of all-stars. The popularity of a professional team was no less than that of some actors, and it could even create an extraordinary amount of discussion. One of the live streaming platforms had already broken 10 million online users in the morning. Each of them had their own team that they supported, and the big clubs had sent out messages in advance about who would participate in the competition. On this day, the internet cafe was unusually quiet. Everyone was holding a beer or Coke, looking up at the big screen in front of them. The tickets for the selection contest had been on sale since a week ago, and the price was getting more and more expensive day by day. Until today, there were still people who wanted to buy tickets. The reason why these people were like this was because they were all waiting for the same scene, the members of the various battle teams entering the arena. Such a grand competition guaranteed absolute viewership ratings. The media had already picked up their cameras, and the staff at the venue were making hand signals. In the middle of the venue, there were rows of computers. They were all made of top-notch equipment, and even the headphones hanging on them were black in color. The scene was no less than a star-studded movie. Sound engineer in position. Lighting technician in position. Commentator in position. Okay, all teams get ready. The countdown begins. The chief director of the competition, dressed in a black cotton-padded jacket, stood in the darkest corner, holding a loudspeaker in his hand. 3. When the director shouted, 2, Fujio, who was standing in the tunnel on the far right, tilted her head. Her side profile was handsome, and her gaze was cool. Are you ready? The 3 nodded in unison. Chapter 2:16. Bang! Lights gathered. Everyone sitting in the audience stand stood up and looked at the home court. 12 teams entered the arena. 4 people for one team. There were a total of 48. There were both men and women in the team. The women were usually very young, and their average age was no more than 92 years old. And the tougher the character in the game, the sweeter the character was, the sweeter the player was. This was the contrast of cuteness that the star-making team emphasized. To be honest, when there was a girl on stage, the first person people saw was a girl. But today, their gazes involuntarily landed on the silver-haired youth. There were girls in the audience, and they almost fell for him at first glance. Who is that? He's so handsome. I don't know. I've never seen him before. Such a handsome person has never been on a live broadcast? This doesn't make sense. What about his team? Do you recognize him from his clothes? I've never seen him before. Not only the female audience, but even the director couldn't help but give the young man a close-up. Not because of anything else, but because of the evil smile on his face. Give this guy more screen time. If this kid plays well, he will definitely become famous. The people backstage were still working. Fujio had a lollipop in her mouth and one hand in her pocket. She led her team to the registration counter. The whole competition would be broadcasted live, and the game name would be shown to all the Hero fans in the country. Both He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong followed her out of the country as agents, but they were not at ease. They were afraid that Fujio couldn't accept failure, so before she came out, they said on the way, "Jio, this competition is just for fun. The most important thing is to participate. Winning or losing isn't important. The most important thing is that you are happy. Chen Xiaodong's way of comforting people was always different from others. Young Master Qin has already accepted you. It doesn't matter even if you are not so addicted to games. People who have slept with you are always better at sleeping with you. Don't worry, no matter whether you win or lose, I will never tell Madam that you are participating for young Master Qin. Fu Jiu glanced at him and hooked his neck with her left hand. Lose? Your young master never loses, understand? He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong didn't say anything else. In their hearts, they only treated Fu Jiu as a child and asked him to go out and explore the world. They had seen those team members before. One blushed as soon as he saw them, and another blushed even when he had a cigarette in his mouth. The only girl was even more likable. But these 4 people. Did they really understand the meaning of the esports selection contest? Besides, Spade Z was definitely not going to appear. He Honghua glanced at the entrance of the passageway again and finally set her eyes on the young man who had caught everyone's attention the moment he appeared. Although He Honghua knew that they were just fooling around, she still couldn't help but clench her fists and whisper, "Joe, you can do it." He hoped that these children could win. Even if they could only win one match, at least they wouldn't have any regrets. Chapter 217. However, the Fu family's team members, who were also causing a sensation, frowned heavily when they saw Fu Jiu. What's going on? Why is this trash calling for a competition? He Honghua probably couldn't find anyone to join her team, so she found a few random players from somewhere and formed a team. Even if she wants to form a team, she doesn't need to find this trash. Those guys are not bad looking, but they are too arrogant. That wasn't enough. He purposely stood in front of Fu Jiu, raised his eyebrows, and smiled with obvious disdain. I didn't expect that someone would still dare to show off after what happened to him. It seems like he hasn't been beaten into submission yet. He must have forgotten how he begged for mercy in school. Otherwise, he would be scared out of his wits. Isn't that right, young Master Fu? As he spoke, he turned to look behind him. Fu Ximing was the prettiest among them, but his little face was still as arrogant as ever. He pretended to be cold as he glanced at Fu Jiu, as if he didn't care about anyone. Why are you talking so much to a layman? Go write your game name and get on the computer. Young Master Fu is right. There's really nothing to talk about with a layman. Apart from Fu Ximing, 2 of the contestants sent by the Fu family were poached from He Honghua's side. Now, it was one of them who answered. Yin Weiyao was a hot-tempered person, and he wanted to beat Fu Jiu up the moment he heard that. Fu Jiu raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. She looked at Fu Ximing and said in a light voice, "Beaten into submission? The one beaten into submission should be the classmate you sent, right? Why? Didn't your young master Fu tell you how I slapped him in the face with the phone?" As soon as Fu Ximing heard that, his expression turned ugly. The more Fu Jiu behaved like this, the more embarrassed he felt when he recalled what happened that day. The other 3 didn't know what was going on. Then they heard Fu Ximing say coldly, "He can only show off for now. When the competition starts, you can fight him however you want. Now, let's go." The Fu family had invited a reporter they were close to. Fu Ximing led his team to the registration area and was immediately surrounded by the media. These were all included in the content of the live broadcast. The difference was that this wasn't a stage, so there would be other interviews during the registration. Yin Weiyao looked at the backs of those people and was still unhappy. His thin lips twitched. Who is that kid? So arrogant? No wonder old Yao doesn't know. He's still young. When you were playing in the team, he was still drinking milk. Fu Jiu looked sideways and curled up the corner of her mouth. How is it? Seeing such a person who deserves to be beaten up, will it motivate you? Yin Weiyao tilted his head. Very capable. Then go write your name. Fu Jiu walked over. The people on Fu Ximing's side saw this and mocked them. How many people would know a wild army's name in the game? Even if it was written, it would be placed at the end of the competition, and it wouldn't get any screen time. The esports selection contest was different from other competitions. Revealing the game name was also a unique attraction of the competition system. Who were the gods that they were familiar with in the game? Chapter 2:18. Many people had already stretched their necks, staring at the name and the corresponding contestant on the screen. That kind of excitement and agitation was indescribable. The people waiting to watch in the internet cafe clenched the can of Coke in their hands, just to see what the Almighty in their hearts looked like in real life. The most important thing was, Spade Z was very likely to be among them. A large part of the reason why there were no empty seats was because there were too many anti-fans, and every single one of them was waiting for Spade Z to show up. The media that the Fu family had invited also focused all their attention on Fu Shiming. Even manager Feng from the Qin Group Club was staring at those professional teams. Plus, there were too many people, so he didn't see Feng Shang. The main reason was that Feng Yi never thought that his brother, who liked to stay at home, would appear in the professional arena. After all, Feng Yi had wanted to bring him here before, but Feng Shang never came. He just watched the live broadcast. In other words, other than He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong, no one's eyes were on the He family army. No. There was one more person. He stood at the top of the arena, wearing a pure black uniform on his shoulders, and a pure white shirt inside. His deep eyes looked down at the ground, and his handsome and noble face was as cold as ever. And the people below couldn't see him. Only when the video was being broadcasted did the camera switch, and the face that could make people scream was transmitted to various live streaming platforms through the video. Almighty Qin. Oh my God, it's really Almighty Qin. I feel that Almighty Qin has become more handsome in just a few days. Is it my illusion? It's not your imagination. Almighty Qin is getting more handsome every day, but what is he looking at? I feel like he's looking at the registration. He must be looking at me. You know, Almighty Qin has high hopes for me. I'm drunk, don't think too much, okay? Wait a minute, Almighty Qin is really looking at people. How is that possible? Why not? Almighty Qin and Spade Z are often together in the game. Is Almighty Qin looking for Spade Z in the crowd to see what he looks like in person? You mean live gay meetup? Looks like it. It was said that Qin Mo's existence was to witness the existence of the pinnacle of esports. In less than a minute, he had set off a wave of clicks. In just 3 minutes, the number of users on the platform had more than doubled. The media was also prepared to take advantage of this period to create another hot topic. As a result, most of the cameras were pointed at Fu Shiming's team. But at this moment, on the other side, which made people think that it was just a wild army, there was a sudden sound, and the whole screen exploded in red. Everyone couldn't help but look back in shock. On the screen was a player named North of Een Mountain, one of the top 5 players in the country. That's right, top 5. People who just started playing Hero might not recognize this name. But all the veteran players who had played for 3 years wanted to take another look at the screen in the middle of the game. After confirming that there was no mistake, the venue fell silent for a second, followed by a shout that came from the chest, Peking University. It really was Peking University. Damn, what should I do? My eyes are red. My favorite pro player is back. Luckily, I didn't give up. I knew that Peking University would definitely come back. Chapter 2:19. As such an unexpected name suddenly popped out, the reporters at the scene were momentarily stunned. Fu Shiming and the others didn't know what happened. North of Een Mountain? Who was that? At this time, it was time for the commentator to come on. The commentator usually played Hero professionally, so of course he was good at crowd control. I'm sure everyone is curious about who North of Een Mountain is. 5 years ago, when Hero wasn't as popular as it was now, a cute kid like me clicked open a video of a national ranking tournament. I still remember that ranking tournament to this day. It was because I saw that person play that I decided to become a professional gamer. That person was none other than North of Een Mountain. But later, for some unknown reason, Peking University left the esports scene, and the name, North of the Mountain Een, never lit up again. I believe that there are many people who feel the same way as me. The one we've been waiting for has finally returned. At the end, the commentator's voice was a bit hoarse. At that moment, some of the people in front of their computers froze. They were not the only ones whose eyes had turned red because of a name. They had only occasionally thought of watching another league match, but their eyes had turned red because of one name. In this world, there will always be such a person. On him, all the memories of your youth are recorded. Even if you get married, have children, and gradually become one of the many people in the world. But when you see that person, you will remember the past that made your blood boil and your eyes light up. North of Een Mountain. That's the kind of person. The crowd was almost out of control. Fortunately, the other commentator joined the industry late. He wiped his partner's face and turned his head to the microphone. He's crying. What should we do? F***ck, I'm not crying. You say you're not crying? Your eyes are red like a rabbit's. Who arranged for you to commentate with me? Didn't you say that since we play together and commentate together, I'm actually in a difficult position? Shut up. Then don't cry. I'll buy you some candy. Listening to those words, not only did the director want to hold his forehead, but even manager Fong dragged his assistant over. Who let them go on stage to explain? Fong, CEO Fong, have you forgotten? You said that the two of them look like a couple. Now, the audience likes to watch them bicker. The most important thing is that the two of them appear together. The click rate is high. Manager Fong took a deep breath. Tell them to leave their love for each other at home. What's important now is... Who is North of Een Mountain? Just now, all the cameras were aimed at Fu Ximing's team. They were waiting for them to reveal something, so they didn't move their cameras. Now that he thought about it, the explosion seemed to have come from the west. In other words, he had only heard the sound and did not see who logged in with the name North of Een Mountain. Fortunately, there were technicians. With a single adjustment, they locked onto the positions of the battle team members who had logged in. Number 31, He Family Army, Een Wuyao. He Family Army? How could this be? Chapter 220. Chen Xiaodong was also shocked, and the shocked expression on his face was very obvious. So the person young master found, was this good? The people on Fu Ximing's side all opened their eyes wide. They never thought that there would be such a person in that wild army. Fu Ximing's expression changed, and then he said casually, "There's nothing strange about this. It's normal for He Honghua to spend money to find a master to shock the scene. As for the others, how can they be so good if they play with Fu Jiu?" However, just as Fu Ximing finished speaking, another light exploded on the He Family Army's side. Awarding you a slap of pleasure, popular player, Glory Zone C, ranked top 7 in the country. Anyone who played Hero would know this ID. This person was not only well equipped, but he was also a top-notch almighty in ranked matches. Almost in an instant, the sound of discussion swept through the entire arena like a tide. Holy sh**t. Who the hell is this He Family Army? This player's ranking is too amazing. More than amazing, they're practically poaching the entire almighty in the hero ranking. To be honest, I thought they were just a small amateur team. I didn't expect them to be so good. How come they didn't even dig up their background? Why didn't they even dig out their background? The media friends were almost crying. Okay. Our friends from the media are also close to crying, alright. How could they have imagined that a temporary team that should not have appeared in front of the cameras would be able to shock the entire audience? Someone was even yelling, "Follow Big Brother, I'll beat you and take you to the skies." These words were all for Feng Shang. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the "awarding you a slap of pleasure" in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. After all, they sometimes played ranked matches in the game, and they had fought against each other before. The other's skills and dialogue were too different from his. Wasn't this the real cuteness? Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the "awarding you a slap of pleasure" in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. His left hand, which was about to give out orders, suddenly stopped. This scene was something that almost no one had expected. First, the Almighty who disappeared 5 years ago came back. Then, it was the RMB Almighty on the super popular rankings. Both of them were from the same team, the He family army. This was a team that no one present had ever heard of before. However, the two people were indeed sitting there, and the computer screen was still emitting a faint blue light, which proved that this matter was true. This time, the director gave the order to change the position of the camera. The member of the Fu family, who was about to log into his account to show the video, stopped in mid-air with an ashen face. They were the most anticipated battle team, but their popularity couldn't compare to a wild team that had appeared out of nowhere. That kind of scene was undoubtedly the most awkward. His face was burning with pain. However, both the audience and the audience outside the arena no longer cared about the Fu's battle team. At this time, almost everyone had the same question in their minds. To be able to gather these two great experts, the captain of this team was definitely not simple. What would his online ID be? Clatter. The faint sound of typing could be heard. Chapter 221. H.E.I. Black. Her fair hands were on the keyboard, and her fingers moved at a surprisingly fast speed. Together with the handsome and evil silver hair of the young man, he was unspeakably cool. Before people could see how the young man was typing, 3 big words appeared on the big screen in the center: Spade Z. Instantly, He Honghua choked. Her mouth was wide open, and she couldn't say a word. She stared blankly at the scene in front of her, and even her black pupils were shocked. Chen Xiaodong's reaction was even more direct, and the support stick in his hand fell to the ground. Spade. Spade Z? His young master was Spade Z? That great god Spade Z who wiped out the whole server? How could this be? Young Master was clearly a gamer who didn't even know how to choose a character. Although Young Master had been working hard recently to chase after Young Master Qin, locking himself in his room every day to play hero. But how could he be Spade Z? Chen Xiaodong glanced at the silver-haired young man sitting in front of the computer again, and even his fingers began to tremble. He couldn't tell what he was feeling at that moment. Excitement, shock, or disbelief. He couldn't believe it, but the audience gave the most direct reaction. Swoosh. Everyone in the audience stood up. Not only that, but the number of clicks on the online platform soared to the highest point because of the appearance of this game ID. The noise in the internet cafe almost blew the roof off. Everyone clenched the can of cola in their hands, and their eyes were shaking as they looked at the screen. Spade Z. That was Spade Z? Because the reaction was too big, the recorder had to stand up to maintain order. Quiet down, the game account hasn't been logged in yet, everyone quiet down. How could they be quiet? That was their Big Spade. The rookie king Big Spade who swept the FC in Zone C. In fact, they didn't have much hope for the appearance of their Prince Charming. The media also said that the reason why Spade Z was so mysterious was probably because he was ugly and unpresentable. Those words weren't very nice. But now, just by looking at that face, passers-by would become his fans. Too handsome. Too young. Especially when the lollipop was in her mouth and her eyes were lowered as she typed, her thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under her eyelids. His messy silver hair matched with his black and white combat uniform didn't make him look decadent. Instead, he looked impeccably handsome. Ostentatious, arrogant, and noble. It was as if he could wipe out an entire army with a single move. This was simply making people's blood boil. Was that their Adonis, Spade Z? Everyone held their breath. The cameras were all aimed at the youngster's face. However, there was a beep. Game account login failed. There was only one sentence on the screen: your account or password is incorrect. This news was like a bucket of cold water, extinguishing everyone's enthusiasm. The amazement from before quickly faded from the audience's faces. It wasn't just the people in the stands, even the commentator couldn't hide the astonishment in his eyes. Login failed? What was going on? Yin Wuyo and Feng Shang, who were already sitting in front of the computer, also turned around abruptly and looked at the young man's side profile. Chapter 222. Just when everyone was in a daze, a sneer suddenly came from the Fu family battle team. Huh, what are they doing? Someone even dared to impersonate Spade Z just to attract attention? Aren't you afraid of being kicked out? Impersonate? These two words were like a tornado that engulfed the entire esports arena. The audience did not want such a thing to happen. Especially the haters, but if it wasn't an impersonation, then how could they explain the fact that the youngster couldn't log into the account? For a moment, everyone looked at Fu Jiu differently. From the excitement just now to the suspicion now, there were even traces of disgust in the eyes of some people. Feng Shang panicked. You, don't talk nonsense. The captain is Spade Z. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. There's actually a stutterer here? The people from the Fu family battle team didn't even bother to hide their laughter. Reward you with a punch of consumer delight? I didn't expect you to be like this in real life. How poor was the He family that they had to find a little stutterer to compete? Feng Shang didn't mind hearing those words, but when manager Feng heard those words, he wanted to drag the speaker over through the glass and teach him a lesson. But before he could move, a loud bang was heard. The silver-haired youngster, who had been sitting in front of the computer, kicked his chair away. With one hand in his pocket, he stared coldly at the members of the Fu family and smiled evilly. Who are you calling a stutterer? What right does a person who betrayed his master have to bark? The young man's voice was very pleasant. It was slow and magnetic, and it grabbed everyone's ears as soon as he opened his mouth. After hearing Fu Jiu's words, the man's entire face turned red. He clenched his fists and wanted to say something more. Fu Shiming stretched out his hand to stop him. His face was full of arrogance. There's no need to talk nonsense with someone who wants to impersonate me. Trying to impersonate him? Soon, someone caught the main point of Fu Shiming's words, and an uproar broke out again. What does young Master Fu mean? Could he be the real Spade Z? Thinking about it, the possibility of young Master Fu being Spade Z is very high. Hadn't the media previously reported that he had been internally selected by the Qin Corporation Club? Such a guess seemed to have been confirmed. Everyone began to look at each other in dismay. The audience's perception immediately leaned towards Fu Shiming's side. If that's the case, then Fu Jiu is really shameless. You're shameless to the extreme, okay? Who could impersonate our big Spade so easily? Shui Yao looked at the condemning gazes directed at the youngster, which made her feel extremely uneasy. The saddest thing in the world was to be impersonated, and you still couldn't prove it was you. Little Captain. It wasn't just Shui Yao, even the uncle Yin Wuyo looked worriedly at the young man's side profile. As a mother, He Honghua's heart ached as she looked at the back of the man standing in the middle, who was despised by everyone. It was her baby. She knew her child better than anyone else. In the past, Jill was weak, had low self-esteem, liked to throw tantrums, and liked to throw money around. But her Gio would never impersonate anyone. Chapter 223. At this time, Fu Shiming was already sitting in front of his computer. With a click of his finger, he logged in and entered the game page directly. The light turned red. The record holder of 99 first kills. The first place in the ranking competition. The game ID that had countless glory appeared in front of everyone just like that. Spade Z. The audience shouted this name in unison. Their chests shook with unspeakable excitement. Fu Shiming curled up the corner of his lips in the cheers of the audience. What his mother said was right. The game ID Spade Z was worth spending a lot of money to hire someone to get it. But he really didn't expect that trash to be Spade Z. When Fu Jio logged in with this game ID just now, he was a little uneasy until someone suggested impersonating him. Then he had a sudden inspiration and came up with such a good idea. In the world of online games, whoever could log in with an ID was the real one. Fu Shiming stood up and glanced at Fu Jio coldly. When he bought the account, he didn't like this Spade Z. It turned out that there was a reason for his dislike. But now, he was going to use this game ID to completely ruin the He family army's reputation. What could Fu Jio do? She could only be anxious. He. The smile on Fu Shiming's face became wider. Old gamers like Feng Shang and Yin Weiyao knew at a glance that their captain's account had been tricked. Motherf ****. Yin Weiyao couldn't help but curse. He left the circle because of the unknown darkness. He didn't expect that when he came back, he would encounter such a disgusting thing right at the beginning. What should he do now? Little Captain was the one who suffered the most, right? Yin Weiyao always said that Fu Jio was a high school student, like an uncle. But now, he really felt sorry for her. How could he not feel sorry? Those who knew Fu Jio were all annoyed. Just when the second wave of sarcasm was about to come, they heard a bang. The door that originally led to the top floor was kicked open by someone. Qin Mo, who was wearing a pure black uniform, suddenly appeared at the door. His long legs were straight, and his side profile was so handsome that he seemed to have walked out of a manga. Standing behind him was Secretary Liang, who was panting heavily. He called out worriedly, CEO Qin. This is still a live broadcast. Even if you can't stand others bullying young Master Zhou, you can't be impulsive. The audience fell into silence the moment Qin Mo appeared. Because no one expected Almighty Qin to come down. Although Qin Mo didn't say anything, the corner of his mouth curved coldly, and there was a strong chill in his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he threw the uniform into Secretary Liang's hand. It was obvious that he was going to do it himself. However, Fu Jio looked back at him with a deep gaze. She just looked at him quietly. Qin Mo stopped in his tracks. The two equally handsome men stared at each other as if no one else was around. Apart from his handsomeness, there were also invisible sparks colliding. No one could understand the twists and turns within. But Qin Mo understood what the youngster meant. He wanted to do it himself. For this, Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fu Jio smiled as well. She touched her thin lips with her fingertips, and her left eye winked seductively. Chapter 224. Seeing that Almighty Qin went back, everyone was confused. What was going on? Logically speaking, Almighty Qin should have kicked whoever pretended to be Spade Z out. Why did he go back? Even Secretary Liang was a bit confused. Just now, CEO Qin's cold aura could almost freeze people's hearts. How come it seemed to have faded away so much? No, that's not right. Rather than saying it faded away, it was more like CEO Qin had suppressed the hostility in his eyes. Secretary Liang didn't think it was a good sign. Usually, the more silent CEO Qin was, the uglier he would die in the end. But what made Secretary Liang feel strange was that CEO Qin still had the patience to stand there and wait. The audience was puzzled as well. They turned to look at the esports arena again. In the midst of all the noise, that young man sat back in front of his computer calmly. His side profile was handsome and indifferent, as if he wasn't the one being despised. Fu Jiu moved her slender fingers and twisted the black microphone on the side. She put it in front of her lips, and her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. Then, she laughed in a low voice. I didn't expect that my account would be hacked after a few days of not playing. But it doesn't matter. There is a good way to prove who is the real one. While she was talking, her hands were still typing on the keyboard. It was a real blind typing, and her fingers were so beautiful that people gasped. Damn! This person's hands are so fast. The commentator said this, and it wasn't hard to hear the amazement on his face. But it wasn't over yet. As Fu Jiu's fingertips fell, the screen in front of her fell into darkness. Apart from a series of white codes, there was nothing else. What is this? Some people were shocked, and they couldn't believe what they saw. It's a network attack. He is doing a network attack on the spot. This is the first time I've seen a real network attack. It's so cool. Network attack? What do you mean? You don't even know this? He is hacking the official website of Hero. Wait a minute. It seems that not only the official website of Hero, but also the live streaming platform is under his control. Holy sh*t. That was way too awesome. Even if this person isn't Spade Z, I will still be his fan. This hacking skill is simply out of this world. Hacking skills? Are you saying that this person is a hacker? F***ck, brother, look at the code. What's that jumping on the screen? Have some common sense. How can a hacker do this? No matter how excited the crowd was, Fu Jiu's sitting posture was still very calm. She was still sucking on the lollipop, but it didn't affect her evil and cold voice at all. Everyone leaves their real information when they create an account. Although my information is hidden through special means, and no one can find out, even the officials can't see it. But all they need to do is touch the hidden data here, and everything will be revealed. The infiltration process was extremely fast. Before anyone could react, the young man had already pressed the enter key. The beautiful finger technique came to a screeching halt. The rhythmic clattering of the keyboard could no longer be heard on the court. Chapter 225. It was Fu Jiu, not Fu Shiming. In an instant, everyone held their breath. Seeing this, those fans who claimed to love Spade Z and scolded Fu Jiu shut up. Instead, some people who didn't say anything just now suddenly shouted, "My big Spade is so handsome." This was a direct acknowledgement of Fu Jiu's identity. In fact, the audience who really liked Spade Z kept a low profile from the moment they entered the arena. They never believed that Fu Shiming was Big Spade. After all, they all remembered their idol's words. Big Spade had said that he would join the He group when he killed someone with one move in the last live broadcast. But the public opinion was distorted by some reports, which made people think that Fu Shiming might be Spade Z. They didn't understand why some fans didn't listen to their idol and believed in some baseless analysis. Are you sure you're a fan and not a hater? The support was very powerful. Just one sentence was followed by a large number of whistles. Fu Shiming didn't expect things to turn out like this. Attacking the official website on the spot and retrieving the registration information. He still felt that everything was a nightmare. Fu Jiu, that sick loser, how could she be so powerful? Not to mention Fu Shiming's reaction, even Feng Shang and Yin Weiyao didn't know that their captain could do this. Hacker? Such a mysterious profession wasn't even close to reality. Chen Xiaodong couldn't believe it. Their family's young master, who only cared about men, was actually a hacker. He Honghua's eyes were so shocked that she couldn't control herself. Her Jiu. That was her Jiu. In the midst of all the noise, Fu Jiu stood up with one hand in her trouser pocket. Her posture was very cool. She looked at the Fu family team over there and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Just 3 words, but Fu Ximing's face turned pale. Even his lips lost their usual arrogance. The word, embarrassment, wasn't enough to describe his expression. But the camera was pointed at him, and everyone in the audience saw the embarrassment on his face. They thought that this was the end of the matter. But those fans who claimed to love Spade Z felt that Fu Jiu's actions were not only a slap to Fu Ximing's face, but also to their faces. They started to make a fuss. Since you are a hacker, surely you can tamper with the official registration information? She wanted to prove that she was Spade Z with just a form. Hee, do you think we're that easy to fool? The real Spade fans almost had high blood pressure. Let me ask, do you really like Big Spade? Not here to defame him. We want the truth. When the self-proclaimed fan said this, he felt like a little angel of justice. Nothing else. Fu Ximing saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better, and his artificial voice rang out again. In this day and age, if you're a hacker, you can even turn black into white. Spade fans couldn't stand his attitude. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to beat him up. At the same time, I'll pack up all those fake fans and throw them out through the window. Those comments stung my ears. Where was his intelligence? But at this moment, Fu Jiu laughed. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be dyed with endless black mist. Fu Ximing, why are you in such a hurry? I didn't ask you to return the account. Chapter 226. Using a new account to compete? The referees looked at each other in shock. For so many years, no one had ever used a new account in the esports selection contest. There were too many limitations of a new account. After all, the top-level equipment in the game could only be used after reaching a certain level. Was this player planning to play in the ranking game without any equipment? But even so, there was no such rule in the rules. Because of the special situation, the referees had to look at the director's room, intending to talk to Manager Feng. Qin Mo's magnetic and deep voice sounded like a bottle of expensive red wine that had just been opened, exuding his unique grace. Let him use it. Being a man of few words was always in line with Almighty Qin's style. But the shoutcasters who knew their captain well felt their backs tighten. It seemed like their captain had never spoken up for anyone before. The 2 shoutcasters, who felt like they were spying on something, looked at each other, and without waiting for the referees to respond, they immediately said, "Okay, now let this player Fu Jiu apply for a new account and get ready for the first match." It was a very straightforward opening match. A live broadcast needed to constantly generate topics, and it couldn't slow down the pace. Every team sat back in front of their computers. Which team would PK with which team in the ranking game was random. They thought it was just a competition, but because of the identity of Spade Z, there was another topic to talk about. The big screen locked onto the list of the first duel. In this match, Fu Ximing and Fu Jiu didn't fight each other. Instead, the group of people who admired Fu Ximing wanted to PK with the He family army. Young Master Fu, let's go first. We'll help you teach this reckless kid a lesson. That little stutterer and a has-been player are just a little bit better on the ranking list. What can they do? Using a new account and still daring to compete? That person sneered. His eyes fell back on the computer screen, and he typed rapidly to his teammates, "The new account is their weakness. Destroy them all." Yes. Understood. The game screen officially turned on. Fu Jiu put on her headphones with her fingers. Her fingers weren't on the keyboard, but she used one hand to move the mouse. The other team thought that a new account with no attack power would be taken down quickly. Who knew that when they all approached the game ID 9? Awarding you a slap of pleasure and North of Een Mountain appeared out of nowhere and used their ultimate skills at the same time. Silver light exploded, and the team was instantly wiped out. It hadn't even been a minute since the battle started. There were still 2 people on the He family army's side who hadn't made a move, but the health of the person on the other side was already empty. Was there still a need to fight? The opponent's captain struggled to stand up. Enchanting turned around and used up the last drop of his pen. Not only was the game being synchronized on the screen, but it was also synchronized with the person playing the game. That beautiful hand speed and counterattack was simply amazing. A has-been god? Little stutterer? Ha, I'll kill you. Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang had never had such tacit understanding before. They typed the same sentence at the same time. A gale of praises rang out in the arena. Chapter 227. Feng Shang was about to vomit blood when he heard that. He was never angry, but his face turned cold. I can't accept your love. This was the first time he broke through his psychological barrier and shouted so loudly in public. Fu Jiu tilted her head and glanced at him. Feng Shang thought that his idol was going to praise him, and he blushed. Unexpectedly, his idol patted him on the shoulder and smiled handsomely. So anger can cure stuttering. Feng Shang, okay, get ready for the second round. Under Fu Jiu's command, the He family army entered the game page. Fu Jiu only moved around for the whole 3 rounds of ranking PK. But was it really as simple as it looked? Anyone who had played the game before would know that the most difficult part of the game was the details. How to move around without being swept by others, and how to move around without affecting the teammates' performance. Only a master could do that. The commentators were all professional players of the Qin Corporation. From what they saw, they could tell that Fu Jiu was not a player who only knew how to leech experience. On the contrary, that young man didn't make a move, but once he made a move, even they couldn't be sure how good he was. But some fans were so arrogant that they firmly believed that Fu Jiu was only here to leech experience. After 1 round, there were only 4 teams left. Finally, a line of words appeared on the screen. He family army PK Fu Corporation team. The members of the Fu family were indeed very good. After all, they had received professional training. No matter how amazing Fu Jiu's hacking skills were, they couldn't believe that the opponent was good at playing games. After all, they had been in the He Corporation for a long time. How could they not know what Fu Jiu was like? And even if the opponent really knew how to play games, how could he beat them with a new account? They were not like the previous teams, who had been hiding their skills for so long. It was not a problem to control the north of Yin Mountain. Captain. Someone typed to Fu Shiming. From the beginning, all the attacks were initiated by the north of Yin Mountain. Should we focus on him? Fu Shiming controlled the account of Spade Z and sent back and forth. I'll block, you guys cooperate. Pay attention to defense. Awarding you a slap of pleasure. Understood. Such a setup clearly showed that they didn't care about Fu Jiu's new account. They didn't even care about Shui Yaoyao. Fu Shiming had bought a lot of top-notch equipment for today's rookie selection contest. He raised his long saber and rushed in the direction of north of Yin Mountain. Their plan was to kill north of Yin Mountain, then turn around and give awarding you a slap pleasure a stunning skill. Because once they made their move, the first person to save north of Yin Mountain was definitely awarding you a slap of pleasure. Someone else? In the He family army, other than these 2 who were worth dealing with, the other 2 only knew how to move slowly. There was simply no need to guard against them. Yin Wuyao had also seen through his opponent's plan, and he immediately went into full defensive mode. You think you can stop me? Fu Shiming coldly laughed. Admit it, north of the Yin Mountain. You are already past your prime. You are just an old pro player who has lost all value. Even if you participate in the competition again, what can you do? Yin Wuyao had to admit, when he heard this, he did pause for a moment. Chapter 228. There was a clicking sound. A rhythmic tapping sound rose up. A clear and cold voice sounded in everyone's ears. Yao Yao, replenish Uncle Yin's blood. Yes. Shui Yao Yao's cooperation was also very good. This girl who was ignored by everyone tilted her mouse and released the potion in time. Fu Jiu's voice was still there. Feng Shang, assist me. Yes. This meant that Fu Jiu was not only controlling her own character, but she was also controlling the overall situation of the battle. Fu Ximing's people saw this and wanted to go back to deal with Shui Yao Yao. After all, if she healed north of Yin Mountain, the HP they just lost would come back. Who knew that before he could move his feet, a figure appeared in front of him. With the Jiu symbol on it, the white robe spread out, and it was as if the wind itself had arrived. The speed at which he rushed up was too fast. Really too fast. That person didn't even see clearly who the person in front of him was. Fu Jiu's slender hands danced on the black keyboard. With beautiful positioning and operation, a killing critical hit. The dazzling silver light filled the entire screen in an instant, creating a magnificent scene. That person who wanted to go back to defend saw his HP drop to the freezing point. He didn't even have the chance to heal himself before he fell down heavily. People who died in ranked matches couldn't be revived. That person looked at the black screen in front of him, threw the mouse in his hand, and arched his long legs forward unwillingly. How did he get hit just like that? However, to everyone's surprise, the young man's attack wasn't over yet. On the screen, when the silver light was about to end, Fu Jiu waved the mouse in her hand and turned back to bite the incoming character. She did another absolute sweep. Holy **T. Yunhu, did you see that? His hands didn't even stop. The shoutcaster was so excited that he grabbed the arm of his friend next to him. The other shoutcaster, Yunhu, surprisingly didn't refute him. He looked at the screen in front of him seriously. Suddenly, his eyes flashed. There's more. There's more. This is unheard of. Fu Jiu had pure black headphones on her silver hair. Her eyes didn't even look at the keyboard. She only stared at the screen, with a lollipop in her mouth. Her left hand was on the keyboard, and her right hand was on the mouse. Generally speaking, the speed of an ordinary person's left hand would not be very fast. But to her, it made no difference whether she used her left hand or right hand. This was also the reason for this unprecedented chain of critical hits. Fu Ximing had no idea what was going on. He only saw a flash of silver light, and his HP dropped by more than half. He didn't expect to be greeted by another wave of silver light before he could even move. He manipulated Spade Z's account, but he didn't even lift his hand. There was a loud bang. Critical strike. Dominating the entire field. The silver light fell. Less than a minute after the start, two large words appeared on the screen. KO. Fu Jiu was still smiling, devilish, handsome, and unruly. However, it was already over. From the moment Fu Jiu put her hand on the keyboard, the ending was decided. The shock never stopped. The entire audience stared blankly at this scene. Not only in the live stream, but even the players in front of their screens were stunned. Their eyes and hearts were numb. Chapter 229. Such a scene seemed to be very familiar. The youngster didn't bring any equipment, and even used a new account, but he could destroy the entire team with one move. Looking at the past 10 years of competitions, only Almighty Qin could do that. This not only tested the player's skills, but also required the player to have a clear strategic layout in his mind. Almighty Qin was known as the most valuable professional player precisely because he had this kind of ability to control the entire field. Now, there was this kind of amazing scene. And it was done by a newbie. This was enough to shock everyone. In fact, even Yin Weiyao didn't expect their team leader to be this good. He looked at the silver light and the two characters that represented a complete victory on the screen. At that moment, the youngster's words came to Ian Wuyao's mind again. How is it enough to win an award? If you don't shock the esports world, why bother playing games? This time, not only the esports world of Jiang City was shocked, but even in the whole country, this kind of skill was top-notch. Especially that last roundhouse that showed how elegant it was to hit the enemy. It was really cool. Those anti-fans who were not convinced were all dumbfounded. That kind of technique was obviously Spade Z's most commonly used counterattack in dungeons. A person's identity could be faked, but the characteristics of this person's character couldn't be erased. And there were people who studied Spade Z's fighting style. If one didn't have a certain level of hand speed, they couldn't imitate it at all. They didn't know how to describe their inner feelings. They only felt the pain on their faces, and that kind of awkwardness was indescribable. Fu Shiming was in a daze the whole time. He was still looking at the screen where the silver light hadn't faded. He couldn't believe that they had been wiped out. Usually, every classic move of the winning side would be replayed on the big screen. This was something that happened in every single competition. However, only this time, when the ultimate move was replayed, even the commentator didn't come back to his senses. He just sat there with his eyes wide open. Whoosh! The whole stadium was filled with whistles. Many people stood up directly, waving their arms and hitting their support sticks loudly. Fu Shiming's face was unprecedentedly pale, without a trace of blood. He was still logged into his Spade Z account on the screen. That gray screen with this ID was very glaring. Everyone knew that a large part of the reason why Spade Z was liked by so many people was because he had never lost in the game. 99 consecutive wins, and as long as he played, he would get the first kill. And it was because of this record that he was so popular. But now, this godly ID with countless glory was in Fu Shiming's hands, and he didn't even have the power to fight back. In the end, it was already clear who was the real one. But it wasn't over yet. Chapter 230. After hearing this sentence, the uproar at the scene almost exploded. The number of clicks on all major online platforms broke 100 million. Everyone was leaving comments in the comments section. Even the platform technicians had never seen such a fast rate of comments. They were even worried that the network would go down. Cool. This is my big spade. I can KO you with a new account. I won't talk if I can do it. Where's the commentator? Play the replay and explain. The commentator has also become my big spades fangirl. I just want to ask you, who else is there? Who else is there? Open your eyes wide, those who are slandering my big spade. I've been waiting in front of the computer for a long time. As a middle-aged uncle, let me give you a scientific explanation. Only my big spade's hand speed can turn around and bite you. Do you understand? Fu Shiming, return my big spade's account. If you don't return it, I'll show you the strength of us hackers. These comments would appear on the live screen at the same time for better interaction online and offline. When the audience saw this, they were all very excited. Middle-aged uncle also likes my big spade? My big spade likes both men and women. He said they are hackers, I don't care. Anyway, return our big spade's account. Return it. In an instant, all the Spade fans in the audience were asking Fu Shiming to return the account. The Fu family's team couldn't even sit still when they were in such an embarrassing situation. Fu Shiming himself clenched his fists, and his face turned white and then purple. How could the media let go of such a scene? Of course, they would capture it immediately. Fu Shiming hurriedly used his hands to block, but the more he did so, the more embarrassing the scene became. Can't you have some manners? Why did you let him return the account to you? Some anti-fans couldn't accept this result. Because once they admitted that Fu Jiao was Spade Z, their words would become knives stabbing themselves. They still wanted to quibble, but as soon as they opened their mouths, they were suppressed. Shut up. Return the account. Don't think that a true Spade fan is easy to bully. When it's time to be tough, you won't be careless. One more word and I'll throw you out. But at this moment, Fujio looked towards the audience and laughed. Her seductive skills and voice made people feel like they were in their bones. I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. As she spoke, her finger moved, and an invisible dialog box appeared on the computer screen. She pressed the enter key. The machine in front of Fu Ximing seemed to be controlled by something invisible, and it began to jump with code that no one could understand. F***CK. While playing games, he could even plant a virus in the opponent. Let me ask you, how did you do it? I was only focused on Big Spade's ultimate move. Gosh. I request the officials to give me a super slow replay. It's useless to watch the replay. It's a technical problem to plant a virus in a game. My Big Spade's handsomeness surpasses the heavens. The commentators finally thawed. That was because Fujio's right hand moved the mouse, and her right hand quickly switched to another account. She logged back into the ID that made countless people who really liked esports but couldn't get ahead through the system. Spade Z. Just like what the young man said, I don't need him to return it, I'll take it back myself. Not only was Spade Z on the screen, but there was also data showing that someone had changed the password of the ID Spade Z 2 days ago. Chapter 231. Fu Ximing's face was almost swollen. The shoutcaster, Yunhu, had also come from the military courtyard. When he saw this, he couldn't suppress his instincts. He sneered into the microphone. I don't think I need to explain this part. The person who spent money to steal someone's account can leave now that he has been exposed. When the Fu family's team members heard this, not only their expressions, but even their movements were stiff. Out of so many esports competitions, they were the only team that was kicked out by the organizer. Not only that, such a large-scale esports live broadcast must have been watched by all the other teams, which meant that they had lost face all over the country. In the future, not only in Jiang City, but also in other cities, this would be their lifelong shame. The audience in the stadium would not give them face at all. If they only lost, they would get the respect of the loser. But Fu Ximing ignored the rules and thought that he was powerful. Not only did he steal someone else's account, but he also incited the media to impersonate them. The reason why gamers loved esports so much was that they could get fairness in Hero that they couldn't get in real life. In the past, background didn't matter here. As long as you were skilled enough, you could stand out. But in recent years, in the esports circle, there were some people who relied on their good looks to find others to play for them, or they could become famous just because they were rich. This made some people feel discouraged. Fu Ximing's blatant actions had completely touched the bottom line. Many real Spade Z fans were worried about Fujio in front of their computers, afraid that the young man couldn't prove himself. But in the end, the young man not only proved himself. It also proved one thing: as long as you had the ability, you wouldn't be afraid of rumors. Nobody knew when it started, but when people saw the ID of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. They didn't know when it started, but when they saw the ID of Spade Z, they would believe that there was still a place in this world where their passion was not extinguished. No one needed to say which team the champion would belong to. The three big words, He Family Army, dominated the 10 screens in the stadium, with Fujio's beautiful and fair face and the slow-motion playback of her ultimate moves. No matter how many times they watched it, it was still too handsome. In the audience, He Honghua's round face was already covered in tears. She covered her mouth with her hands, afraid that she would cry. She had never told anyone about how she had led her life. Sometimes, she was so tired that she wanted to divorce Fu Zhongyi. In this world, there are too many people who will respect you because you have enough money, power, and culture. He doesn't care what you did. On the same occasion, she appeared with the three. She was just a village girl. She deserved to be robbed by that man. That third was a fairy who was praised by others. Who asked her to not be as good-looking as him, and to have such a figure. He Honghua didn't like money, but she couldn't live without it. What about her Joe? Once she filed for divorce, the company would lose her. What would happen to her Joe in the future? She couldn't swallow her anger. He had to earn it back. However, all of her team members had been poached away at the last minute. She had been deserted by her friends and family, and she had been slandered by the public. Everyone wanted to step on her and make her completely bankrupt. He had really been discouraged before. In such a dark night, she had to travel from city to beg for help. She really wanted to cry. Even when the He family army appeared, she still thought that she would just treat it as her Joe's happiness. But he had won. Chapter 232. He Honghua didn't know how to describe her feelings. She just looked at the tall and slender figure on the field with red eyes. In a mother's mind, the greatest happiness for her child was to be recognized. The background music of Hero sounded. All the members of the He family army stood up. Every one of them had very bright eyes. We have to admit that sometimes there was a kind of handsomeness that had nothing to do with appearance. It was a kind of aura that emanated from the inside out. 4 people of different heights, wearing the same uniform, stood side by side. The youngster was in the lead, and behind them were rows of glowing computer screens. All the cameras were aimed at one direction, the captain of the He family army, Fu Jiu. Just as some people expected, this youngster was going to be popular. The esports selection contest organized by the Qin Group was broadcasted nationwide. It wasn't over yet. Over there were reporters asking questions at the All-Star press conference. The question was from the ever-victorious team that suppressed the Supreme Alliance last year, the Xiangnan team. Almighty Xiao, I don't know if you paid attention to the selection contest organized by the Qin Group. The person called Almighty Xiao sat calmly. How can I pay attention when I'm here? Reporter. There's no way to continue this topic. I heard that there's a player called Spade Z over there. He destroyed the whole field as soon as he appeared. The man raised his eyebrows. There's such a thing? It's being broadcasted on all the online platforms. The reporter was already excited when he said this. He wanted to grab some news. After all, everyone knew that Xiangnan and the Supreme Alliance would have a tough battle in the national competition soon. If he could grab some news at this time and use it as a gimmick, it would definitely be a hit. The man just glanced at the reporter and then. Oh. Just an oh? Tell me what you're feeling right now. The agent standing behind the man couldn't stand it anymore. He smiled like a Maitreya Buddha. Xiao Jing, you can tell me more about your feelings. Feelings? Xiao Jing thought about it seriously and said, please broadcast this kind of esports competition on TV. I don't like the internet. Reporter. You, an esports god, don't like the internet. I heard that Almighty Qin appreciates this Spade Z very much. The reporter saw that Xiao Jing was about to leave, so he had to use his big move. As expected, the man walked back, his face serious. Tell me in detail, how did Qin Mo appreciate this newcomer? Reporter. Xiao De, this is a press conference, not a small talk. You're paying so much attention to Almighty Qin, aren't you secretly in love with him? The people from the other teams saw it too. There were many players from the top 4 in the country. This Spade Z is not bad. Why don't you say that it's because his opponents are too weak? There will always be some loopholes in his attacks. It's just that his opponents didn't notice them. Anyway, we'll meet him in the national competition. Let's show him what really sports is like then. Of course. Regardless of what was going on in the outside world, the golden trophy that symbolized first place was already in Fu Jiu's hands. Regardless of whether they were professional or non-professional, all of the hero fans were watching this scene through the live stream, You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.